Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Pranic Healing Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Yuan. And on this episode, we're going to talk about the topic of death and dying. Now, this podcast episode is dedicated in the memory and the celebration of life of a very special person in not only my life, but in many pranic healers' life, and that person is Cynthia De Leon. So Cynthia was a senior pranic healer for about 30 years, and she really made an amazing impact on so many people's lives, especially for myself. And she recently passed away this past week. Although it's a very sad moment for her not to be in her physical body, I think this is a great opportunity for us to look back and to celebrate her accomplishments and all that she has done for the community and especially myself. Cynthia was one of the kindest, gentlest, and most supportive mentors I've ever had. And I am forever grateful for the impact that she had on me as a person. And so for today's topic, I wanted to talk about death and dying from the spiritual perspective that was taught in pranic healing through Grandmaster Choa Kok Sui's teachings. Let's kind of get into it. So, in order to understand death and dying, we must understand what the opposite is too, right? Which is life and living. As we know, there is this perspective of the soul in pranic healing, and in not only in pranic healing, but many other spiritual practices and religions identify the aspects of the soul. When we are born, when we come into a infant's body, we call that the incarnated soul. Incarnate meaning coming to flesh, right? And the soul is a piece of the soul which comes from the higher soul. So the higher soul, think of it like the reservoir of water. And when someone is born, a portion of that reservoir is poured into a smaller cup, which is the body. And that smaller portion, again, is the incarnated soul. When that comes in, okay, that's when we know someone's alive, right? Because the incarnated soul animates the body. And when we say animates, it gives it life, right? It gives it motion. It gives it the perspective of consciousness, okay? And this is very important to understand because we understand life is not just biology, neurology. It's just not just the formation of different cells that undergoes fertilization, right? When an egg and a sperm meet, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but simple as well. So we understand that there is soul energy in every person. And the soul energy manifests in different ways. So in pranic healing, in our Hatha Yoga, we understand that there are three vehicles for the soul to carry out its actions, movements, things like that. First is the physical body, of course, something that we know. Second is the emotional body. Okay, so that's the body where we feel our feelings and emotions. Third is the mental body, where we can think and ponder about our thoughts. Okay, and of course, again, the physical body is the body where we can move around this plane on Earth. So those are the three bodies in which the soul uses as a vehicle to get around in Earth on this plane. And I like to describe it almost as if the soul is on like a carriage, sitting on a carriage, and it has these ropes around these three horses. And these three horses are the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body. And this is important to understand because part of why we're born in this life is to learn lessons. And these lessons are different for everyone, but they usually revolve around the physical body, the emotional body, and the mental body. Because even though the soul is made out of pure energy, it is not yet perfect. So, in order for us to grow and learn, we incarnate, we come into this life, and then we learn the lessons through these three bodies. It might be learning, of course, through the physical body, not learning to harm anyone physically, the emotional body not being emotionally harmful to other people, right? And also harmful to yourself by thinking and feeling negative thoughts and emotions. So that's for the emotional and mental body. Or it can be also about being stronger, right? Inner strength in terms of challenges and obstacles in your way and not giving up, but pushing forward. So that requires all these three bodies to be kind of working together. And when these three bodies are working together, right, in harmony with the soul, the person that is on the carriage trying to steering these horses, right, that's when you have a really, what Cynthia would call it, a soul-filled life. Because that soul energy that can see far ahead, right, that can understand what's coming down the road versus the horses, which just sees what's in front of them and that's it. You know, your life becomes much more easier. As Cynthia would say, your life would be in flow, right? Just going with the flow and almost naturally avoiding certain obstacles, but capturing certain opportunities. And I think that's a way of living that we all want to, strive to achieve, right? Because it makes life so much more enjoyable that way. So that's why it's very important to understand the aspects of the soul in this aspects of the three vehicles is when the soul energy comes down and is strong and has more power over these three vehicles, you can start to live an amazing life. And this is important also because when it comes time to getting certain things done, learning certain lessons, especially the lessons that you have to um, face in this life. Many people describe Earth as a school, and it is definitely not an easy school. There are certain lessons that we all have to eventually face. And those lessons, especially if the soul is of a higher degree, higher level of training, education, higher level of involvement, those challenges will be harder, right? And this is to give perspective because this is what I really enjoy about spirituality and teachings of the soul is that every soul is on their own journey. Every soul is on their own different level of evolvement. And, we can't compare. We can't compare. And therefore, we just try to do our best with what we have, with what our given situation is in life. And we just try to move forward from that. And I think Cynthia especially was such an amazing embodiment of the teachings because she was someone so well-rounded as a person and a reflection of her soul too, because she was someone that was very strong analytically in her mind, right? She wrote math textbooks in statistics, and she was the head of finance for a big corporate operation. She was the finance person for the children's orchestra in New York. But she also, of course, was a piano teacher. She was a composer. She helped produce the music and play the music for Twin Hearts Meditation. And it was just really amazing to see that balance, that harmony in her life, in both the aspects of being very logical, but also the aspects of being very creative. And that was very inspiring for many of us. And I think that it's important for us to find that balance too in life, right? Because as Cynthia would say, right, when you have enough of that soul energy coming down and activating the certain chakras and energy centers, and of course, in pranic healing, we emphasize and stress the importance of purification, when your bodies are sufficiently clean, right, the soul energy can act as fertilizer and things will grow. And you move and you develop and you evolve at an accelerated pace compared to not having these teachings, not having these practices that are taught in pranic healing and arhatic yoga. Living life is one part. Having this understanding of the soul, the incarnated soul, these three bodies, right, trying to live a happy, balanced, harmonious life is very important. And that comes to death and dying. I think the universal principles are universal because they apply in so many different aspects of life. Just as we need to inhale, eventually we need to exhale, right? As we attach to something, we need to eventually detach. And this is the aspect of dying that many people are afraid of because, what happens next? Where do we go? Of course, we understand that in pranic healing, death happens when the soul energy leaves the body, right? Leaves the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body. So that's what stays behind. And the withdrawal of the soul energy goes back to that main reservoir I talked about earlier, right? So just like how you have a cup of water, right, that was poured into, you take that exact cup of water and you pour it back to the main reservoir, okay? And then the incarnated soul merges back with the higher soul. And from that perspective, that's death. And you return back to your whole being. You become, for most people, you realize that, oh, okay, I was a soul this whole time. I wasn't this person, Jacobs, that was in this life. I was just acting, playing the role of John Jacobs in this particular life, and I was just doing certain things to learn certain lessons. But once those, the time has come, the incarnation is over, and then the soul returns. And I think that gives us, especially as pranic healers, arhatic yogis, a lot of comfort because we understand that there is more to death than just not existing, right? And that death is a liberation of the soul and returning back to wholeness, oneness with God and your higher soul. And, I think that when you see it in this perspective, when you see that life is just a universal cycle of attachment and detachment, right? Where you inhale and the soul comes in, and then you exhale and the soul leaves the body. That gives, especially for me, a lot of comfort and confidence moving forward that, yeah, things are temporary. Things are very temporary, although it might seem like it's taking forever or it's taking a long time. And life is short. Life is very short, and it's very important to make the most out of every moment. And it's also important to understand that your mistakes don't matter as much as you think. Right? When you compare to the perspective of the soul, that might have thousands and thousands of lifetimes, right? It's just one, photo frame. It's just one video frame of the movie of all the lives that your soul lived. And I think that should inspire us, just like looking at Cynthia's life, to do more, to do the best that we can, to live a soul fulfilled life, because that's the best way to do it. And Cynthia was the humble, gracious example that we, many of us knew her to be. At the time of her passing, when I found out, I didn't have sadness for her, but I felt so much compassion and gratitude for her because she, again, had such a big heart and acted on it. She lived a truly meaningful, purposeful life where she touched everyone she spoke to, She taught as a teacher, as a piano teacher, as a pranic healing teacher, as a arhatic yoga practitioner, right? As a student and disciple of Grandmaster Choa Kok Sui. Cynthia was really just a one of a kind soul. You can tell by just the way she talks that she's not just talking from her, physical body, her emotional body, her mental body. There's something bright. There's almost like a spark, a light behind her, animating her. And I always think back about all of the lessons that she's taught us, and that everyone has the ability to live an extraordinary life, right? And to live that extraordinary life, you have to realize that you're the soul. You're not the body, you're not the thoughts, you're not the emotions, you're not the mind, and that you are this unique individual soul that is living and expressing and experiencing life, right, through its own lens. And for us, for me especially, that I have had opportunity to have Cynthia on the podcast for 2 times. You really just, every time you hear her speak, you hear the wisdom, you hear the lights, you hear the love that comes out of her voice when you see her on video. I think that when we can use role models and examples like Cynthia, it can inspire us to be our own version, right? Our own version of Cynthia, our own version of, living our future dream life fulfilled. And that's what Cynthia did for many of us. So again, in this episode, we talked about death and dying, but from the perspective of seeing it as the soul. In Grandmaster Choa Kok Sui's teachings, which he has clearly and simply organized and outlined everything, we can see that, again, life and death is just part of this universal principles where we inhale and exhale, where the soul energy comes in as the incarnated soul, animating these 3 bodies. And when it's time, when the physical body starts to become old, the soul energy returns and returns back to our higher soul and source and God. And that is something really beautiful to always not only understand, but to remember and to apply. Life is a process. Life has many lessons. We're going to make mistakes, but if you can remember that aspect and you realize that we're here for a purpose, we're here to learn our lessons, we're here to make positive changes, I think that'll help us move forward and to help others to realize their true potential and to see what we see, just as Cynthia did for all of us. All right, everyone. Atma Namaste. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pranic Healing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting the podcast by being a monthly subscriber. Your generous contributions help support the podcast operations and help us bring on amazing guest speakers to talk about all the different aspects of pranic healing. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Take care, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.